What Ray J is now claiming about Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner has the internet questioning everything. Because this isn't just another interview. This isn't just old drama coming back up. According to Ray J himself, there's way more to that story than what the public has been told for the last 20 years. We're talking about multiple tapes, private agreements, and a version of events that sounds completely different from the narrative most people believe. And the craziest part? He's not whispering about it anymore. He's saying it loud. Naming names. Calling out situations. And suggesting that what we've all seen play out publicly might not have been the full truth. Now on one side, you have people saying, he's finally exposing everything. He stayed quiet too long. This is the truth coming out. But on the other side, people are calling this out as something else entirely. Why now? Where's the proof? Is this about truth or attention? And right in the middle of all of this, a legal battle. Statements being denied. Narratives clashing in real time. Because while Ray J continues to speak, the response from the other side has been just as strong. Which raises the biggest question of all. If even part of what he's saying is true, then what really happened behind the scenes? And why is this all coming out now? Stay with me. Because once you start connecting the dots in this situation, it gets a lot more complicated than anyone expected. To understand why what Ray J is saying right now has the internet in a frenzy, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Because this story didn't just start today. It didn't even start recently. It started over a decade ago, with one moment that changed everything for Kim Kardashian. At the time, Kim wasn't the global icon people know today. She wasn't dominating headlines, billion-dollar brands, and reality TV. She was known, but not that known. And then something happened. Something that instantly pushed her into the spotlight in a way nobody could ignore. That moment? It became one of the most talked about celebrity controversies of its time. And right at the center of it was Ray J. Now here's what made that situation so powerful. It didn't just go viral, it created a narrative. A very specific one. The story most people heard was simple. That Kim was the victim of something being exposed without her control. And that she had to deal with the fallout publicly while building her image from that moment forward. That narrative? It stuck. For years. It became part of her story. Part of her rise. Part of how the public understood everything that came after. But here's where things get complicated. Because according to Ray J, that version of events isn't the full story. In fact, he's been hinting for years that what really happened behind the scenes was very different from what the public was told. At first, people didn't pay much attention. It sounded like frustration. Like someone trying to clear their name after being blamed for something controversial. And over time, the story faded into the background. Kim's career exploded. The Kardashian brand grew. Reality TV, business deals, global influence, it all kept moving forward. And Ray J? He stayed relatively quiet. At least publicly. But that silence didn't mean the situation was resolved. Because behind the scenes, things were still tense. Still unresolved. Still tied to a moment that never fully went away. And then came the shift. Because in recent years, Ray J started speaking again. More openly. More directly. And more confidently than before. He began pushing back against the original narrative. Claiming that he had been painted in a certain way. While the truth, according to him, was never fully told. Now here's where things start to get intense. Because once he started talking again, it didn't just bring up the past. It introduced new claims. New angles. New details that people hadn't heard before. And suddenly, the story wasn't just about what happened back then. It was about what might have been happening behind the scenes the entire time. Meanwhile, On the other side, the response has been just as strong. Legal action, public denials, statements making it clear that the claims being made are not accepted as truth. Which means right now, we're not looking at a resolved story. We're looking at a conflict. An ongoing one. With two completely different versions of events. And that's what makes this so explosive. Because when you have one side claiming there's more to the story, and another side firmly denying it, that creates tension. The kind that doesn't go away. The kind that grows. Especially when it involves names this big. Now add in one more element. Timing. Because this isn't happening randomly. This is happening now. Years after everything originally happened. Years after the narrative was already established. Years after people thought the story was over. So naturally, people are asking. Why now? Why speak up at this moment? What changed? And what does Ray J know, or believe he knows, that made him decide to come forward like this again? Because here's the truth. Situations like this don't resurface without a reason. There's always something behind it. Whether it's new information, new pressure, or something building behind the scenes that the public hasn't fully seen yet. And that's what makes this moment feel different from everything before it. Because this time, it's not just hints. It's not just vague comments. It's direct, detailed, and impossible to ignore. Now the internet is paying attention. Breaking down every statement. Comparing timelines. Trying to figure out what's real. What's exaggerated. And what might still be hidden. Because if there's even a chance that the original story wasn't complete, then that changes how people look at everything that came after it. And that's where things get even more complicated. Because this isn't just about one moment anymore. It's about legacy. About image. About a story that helped shape one of the most powerful celebrity brands in the world. And if that story is being questioned, even slightly, that has ripple effects. Big ones. So now the stage is set. Two sides. Two narratives. One story that refuses to stay in the past. And the biggest question of all still unanswered. What really happened behind the scenes? Because if what Ray J is saying continues to gain attention, this situation might not just reopen old wounds. It might completely change how this entire story is understood. The moment Ray J started going into detail, that's when everything shifted. Because this wasn't vague anymore. This wasn't just, there's more to the story. This was specific. Direct. And the way he was saying it? It didn't sound like someone guessing. It sounded like someone trying to correct a narrative. According to Ray J, what the public has believed for years about Kim Kardashian isn't how things actually went behind the scenes. And that's where the conflict really begins. Because now you don't just have a past controversy. You have two completely different versions of it. One that the public has accepted for over a decade. And one that Ray J is now pushing back against, hard. He started claiming that what people saw wasn't random. That it wasn't something that just happened. But rather something that involved agreements, discussions, and decisions made behind the scenes. Now let's be clear, these are his claims. But the impact? Huge. Because once you introduce the idea that something may have been planned, even slightly, it changes how people look at everything. And that's exactly what happened. The internet didn't just react. It exploded. People started revisiting old interviews, old clips, old statements from both sides, trying to line everything up, trying to see if anything now looks different in hindsight. And the more people looked, the more questions started forming. But here's where things take a serious turn. Because Ray J didn't stop at just questioning the past. He started introducing new details. Things that weren't part of the original public narrative. Things that, according to him, had never been fully revealed. He hinted at there being more material than what the public ever saw. More than what people believed existed. Now again, these are allegations. But even the suggestion of that, it was enough to send shockwaves through social media. Because now the story isn't just what happened back then. It becomes what else hasn't been shown. And once that door opens, it's hard to close. Now fans are divided. Some people believe Ray J is finally telling his side after years of staying quiet. Others think this is an attempt to rewrite history. To reinsert himself into a story that had already moved on. And that divide? It's what keeps the story alive. Because controversy thrives on uncertainty. And right now, there's a lot of it. But here's the first twist nobody expected. Because while all of this was happening publicly, the response from Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner wasn't silence. It was legal. Reports surfaced that legal action had been taken in response to Ray J's statements. Claims of defamation. Accusations that his comments were part of a pattern. And clear denials that what he was saying reflected reality. Now that changes the situation completely. Because once lawyers get involved, this isn't just public opinion anymore. It becomes something more serious. More structured. More controlled. And it raises the stakes for everyone involved. Because now every statement matters. Every claim. Every response. Everything can be used. Which means this isn't just a media moment. It's a legal battle playing out in real time. And that adds pressure. A lot of it. But Ray J didn't back down. If anything, he leaned in even more. He continued speaking. Continued doubling down on his version of events. Saying that he wanted to tell his truth. That he had stayed quiet long enough. And that what people believed needed to be questioned. Now whether people believe him or not. That persistence? It kept the story alive. And it forced people to keep paying attention. But here's where things get even more intense. Because another twist started forming. One that wasn't directly confirmed. But started gaining traction fast. The idea that this isn't just about the past. That there might be something happening right now behind the scenes. Because think about it. Why bring this up again at this level? Why risk legal action? Why push so hard on something this old? Unless there's more to it. And that's the part that has people watching closely. Because some are starting to believe that this isn't just about clearing a name. It's about something bigger. Something that hasn't fully come out yet. And if that's true, then what we're seeing now is just the beginning. But here's the biggest twist so far. Because despite everything being said, despite the interviews, despite the legal responses, there's still no single, clear answer. No confirmed version of events. No resolution. Just two sides. Standing on completely different truths. And that's what makes this so powerful. Because as long as there's uncertainty, the story keeps going. It evolves. It grows. It pulls more people in. And right now, it's doing exactly that. Because the more people talk about it, the more pressure builds. For answers. For clarity. For something that finally settles it. But that hasn't happened yet. And until it does, everything remains open. Which means the biggest question still hasn't been answered. What actually happened behind the scenes? Because if Ray J continues to speak, and if more details continue to surface, this situation might not just revisit the past. It might completely reshape it. And that's where things take an even more dramatic turn. Just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more intense, it did. Because the conversation didn't stay contained to interviews anymore. It spread. Fast. Across every platform. And suddenly, what Ray J was saying wasn't just being heard. It was being dissected. Line by line. Word by word. People started pulling up old footage of Kim Kardashian, revisiting past statements, comparing timelines, and trying to figure out if anything didn't match up. And once that process started, it didn't stop. Because the more people looked, the more they thought they were finding patterns. Moments that seemed different now. Statements that felt less clear in hindsight. And that's when the narrative began to shift again. Because now, it wasn't just about whether Ray J was telling the truth. It was about whether the original story was ever fully complete. And that idea? That possibility? It hit hard. But here's where things take a shocking turn. Because while the internet was busy analyzing everything publicly, more claims started surfacing. Not confirmed. Not verified. But repeated enough to gain attention. Claims about additional material. Claims about private agreements. Claims that suggested this situation might be much larger than what had been originally presented. Now again, these are allegations. But the impact? Massive. Because once people start believing that there could be more hidden, the focus shifts. From what we've seen to what we haven't seen. And that's where things get complicated. Because speculation fills gaps. And right now, there are a lot of gaps. Meanwhile, on the other side, the response remained consistent. Firm denials. Clear statements that the claims being made are not accurate. And a continued push to frame the situation as misinformation. Which creates a direct clash. Two narratives. Both strong. Both being repeated. Both gaining support from different sides. And that's when the situation reaches a different level. Because now, it's not just about facts. It's about belief. Who people choose to believe. And why. Now here's the part that really changed everything. Because during one of the discussions, something stood out. Not just what was said, but how it was said. Ray J didn't sound uncertain. He didn't sound hesitant. He sounded confident. Like someone who believes they know something the public doesn't. And whether that confidence is justified or not, it has an effect. Because confidence makes people listen. Even if they don't fully agree. And once people start listening, the story grows. But at the same time, that confidence also raises questions. Big ones. Because when someone makes strong claims without presenting clear proof publicly, it creates tension between curiosity and skepticism. And that tension? That's exactly what's driving this story right now. But here's where things get even deeper. Because some people started asking a different kind of question. Not, what happened back then? But, what's happening right now? Because situations like this don't resurface randomly. There's always a trigger. Something that brings it back into the spotlight. And while nothing has been confirmed, the timing itself has become part of the discussion. Why now? Why this moment? Why this level of intensity? And that's where the speculation starts expanding. Because now, people aren't just looking at the past. They are looking at the present. Trying to figure out if there's something happening behind the scenes that hasn't been revealed yet. Something that explains why this is all coming back up again. And that's when the story shifts again. From a past controversy to a present-day mystery. Because now the focus isn't just on what happened years ago. It's on what could still be unfolding. Right now. And that's what makes this moment so unpredictable. Because we're in the middle of it. Not at the beginning. Not at the end. Right in the middle. Where things can still change. Where new information can still surface. Where the entire narrative can still flip. And that's what has everyone watching closely. Because if even one new piece of confirmed information comes out, it could change everything. Either confirm what's being said, or shut it down completely. But until that happens, everything remains open. Which means the tension continues. The debates continue. The speculation continues. And the story? It keeps building. Because when you have a situation this public, this controversial, and this unresolved, it doesn't just fade away. It escalates. It evolves. It reaches a point where something has to happen. A response. A reveal. A moment that finally shifts everything one way or the other. And right now, we haven't reached that moment yet. But it's coming. You can feel it. Because stories like this don't stay in this stage forever. They move. They break. They change. And when this one does, it might not just revisit the past. It might completely redefine it. And that's exactly why people can't look away. The moment this situation reached peak visibility, it stopped being just a back and forth between Ray J and Kim Kardashian. It became a full-blown culture debate. Because now everyone had an opinion. And just like that, the internet split into two sides. On one side, you had people backing Ray J. They believe he's finally speaking his truth after years of staying quiet. Comments started flooding in like, "He's been saying this for years, you're just now listening." They painted him as the villain back then, now he's correcting it. Why would he keep bringing this up if there wasn't something behind it? For this group, it's not about proving every detail. It's about questioning the original narrative. They feel like something never fully added up. And now they are finally seeing another side of the story. But on the other side, the reaction is completely different. Because many people are defending Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner. Their argument? Simple. There's no proof. This is just attention. Why bring this up after all these years? And that's where the tension gets real. Because both sides are looking at the same situation and coming to completely different conclusions. One side sees exposure. The other sees exaggeration. And neither side is backing down. Now here's where things start to shift again. Because it wasn't just fans reacting anymore. The industry started responding too. But not in the way people expected. No big statements. No direct involvement. Just distance. Silence. Careful positioning. People who normally jump into trending topics. They stayed quiet. And in situations like this, that silence means something. Because when something is simple, people speak freely. But when it's complicated, when it involves major names, legal issues, and reputations, people step back. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Even content creators, who usually take strong positions, started being more cautious. Using words like allegedly, claimed, according to him. Because everyone understands one thing. This isn't just drama. It's serious. Now here's another layer that made things even more intense. Because some reactions didn't come from statements. They came from behavior. Subtle things. Changes in tone. Shifts in how people talk about the situation. And those shifts, they tell a story. Because when people start being careful about how they speak, it usually means they understand the weight of what's being discussed. And right now, that weight is heavy. But the most interesting reactions came from people who are trying to stay neutral. Because instead of picking a side, they are asking questions. Real questions. Like, if there's more to the story, why hasn't it been proven? If the original narrative isn't complete, what's missing? And why is this all coming out now? Those questions? They are what keep the story alive. Because they don't push the narrative in one direction. They keep it open. Unresolved. And that uncertainty? That's what drives engagement. That's what keeps people watching. Now here's the biggest shift happening right now. Because the conversation is no longer just about the past. It's about perception. About how people choose to interpret what they are seeing. And that's powerful. Because perception shapes reality, at least in the public eye. And right now, perception is divided. Some people are starting to question things they never questioned before. Others are doubling down on what they already believe. And both sides are becoming more confident in their positions. Which means this isn't calming down anytime soon. Because when people become emotionally invested, when they feel like they're defending something, or exposing something, that's when things escalate. And that's exactly what's happening here. But here's the part that matters most. Because despite all the reactions, all the debates, all the speculation, we still don't have one thing. A clear answer. No confirmation. No resolution. Just ongoing tension. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because we're at a point where the next move, from either side, could change everything. A statement. A response. A piece of evidence. Something that shifts the balance. And until that happens, everything we're seeing right now is just the build-up. Because situations like this don't end in silence. They end in moments. Big ones. And something tells me we're getting close to that moment. Just when it felt like everything had already been said, something shifted again. Not a new interview. Not a lawsuit update. Something quieter, but way more unsettling. Because while the internet was busy arguing, picking sides, and replaying old clips, people started noticing a pattern. A pattern in timing. A pattern in how information was coming out. And once that clicked, everything started to feel different. Because think about it. Every time Ray J speaks, the story escalates. Every time the conversation starts to calm down, something new gets brought up. A new claim. A new angle. A new detail that pulls everyone right back in. And that raised a question nobody was asking at first. Is this just random, or is there something bigger happening behind the scenes? Because situations like this don't usually stay alive for this long without a reason. Especially not after so many years. Which brings us to the twist that has people watching closely. Because some are starting to believe that this isn't just about the past anymore. It's about control of the narrative, right now. Who gets to define the story? Who gets believed? And who ends up rewriting what people think they already know? And that's powerful. Because once a narrative starts shifting, even slightly, it can change everything that comes after it. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because just as people were starting to question the timing, another detail resurfaced. One that had been mentioned before, but not fully understood. The idea that there may be more information that hasn't been made public. Not confirmed. Not proven. But suggested. And that suggestion alone? It's enough to keep people hooked. Because now the story isn't just what happened. It's what hasn't been revealed yet. And that's a completely different level of suspense. Because when people believe there's something hidden, they keep watching. They keep waiting. They keep analyzing everything that comes next. Now here's the part that really changes how you look at everything. Because despite all the noise, despite all the claims, despite all the reactions, one thing still hasn't happened. There hasn't been a final, definitive moment. No clear resolution. No single piece of confirmed information that shuts everything down. Which means this story is still open. Still evolving. Still moving in real time. And that's what makes this moment so unpredictable. Because we're not looking back at something that already ended. We're watching something that's still unfolding. Right now. Which means anything could happen next. A statement. A response. A reveal that either confirms everything, or flips the entire narrative in the opposite direction. And here's what makes it even more intense. Because both sides have something at stake. For Ray J, it's about being heard. About changing how people see his role in something that defined a major moment in pop culture. For Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner, it's about protecting a narrative that has been part of their story for years. And when both sides are that invested, the situation doesn't just fade. It builds. It escalates. It reaches a point where something has to give. And right now, we haven't reached that point yet. But we're close. You can feel it. Because the silence between updates, the gaps between statements, they are not empty. They are loaded. With conversations happening behind the scenes. With decisions being made. With strategies being planned. And when those plans finally come into the light, that's when everything changes. So now the question isn't just, who's telling the truth? It's, what happens when the full story finally comes out? Because if what we've seen so far is only part of it, then whatever comes next might not just revisit the past. It might completely rewrite it. And trust me, when that moment hits, everyone is going to be watching. Now I want you to really think about everything we just broke down. Because this situation, it's not black and white. When Ray J started speaking again about Kim Kardashian and Kris Jenner, it didn't just reopen an old story. It challenged everything people thought they already knew. So now I need your opinion. Do you think Ray J is finally telling his truth after years of staying quiet? Or do you think this is just another wave of claims without real proof? And what about the timing? Why now? Why bring all of this back after so many years? Do you think there's something bigger happening behind the scenes? Or is this just about controlling the narrative again? Because let's be real. The internet is completely divided on this. Some people are saying, this changes everything. Others are saying, there's nothing new here. And until something is actually confirmed, both sides are going to keep going. So drop your thoughts in the comments right now. White right pointing backhand index, who do you believe in this situation? White right pointing backhand index, do you think the original story was complete, or missing key details? White right pointing backhand index, and do you think we're going to see more information come out soon? I'm telling you right now, this story is not over. Because whenever something like this comes back into the spotlight, it doesn't just disappear. It builds. It leads to something bigger. A statement. A reveal. Something that finally pushes everything in one direction. So make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the moment anything new drops, we're breaking it down immediately. No delays. No missing details. And trust me, if what we've seen so far has already sparked this much debate, you do not want to miss what comes next. Because something tells me, the real twist in this story hasn't happened yet.